The crystalline beings of the Vexhari Council chamber floated in their energy pods, their diamond-like bodies pulsing with cold light. Commander Velthara's voice echoed through the vast hall like breaking glass as she addressed the 12 species gathered before her. "The humans of Sol 3 have become a problem," she announced, her crystalline form shifting colors from blue to threatening red. "Their expansion beyond their home system violates galactic law. They consume resources without permission. They explore space without asking for approval." The massive, insect-like Skithron clicked their mandibles in agreement. Their representative, a creature the size of a small building, spoke with a voice like grinding metal. "These humans breed too fast. They build too much. They ask no one for permission to exist." On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Kim Dae-ho was working late in his laboratory in Seoul. The quantum physics professor had been studying strange energy readings from deep space when every screen in his lab suddenly went white. Then, impossible, words began to appear. The message wrote itself in perfect Korean characters, as if the alien intelligence sending it could read his mind and know his language. Kim rubbed his eyes, thinking he was seeing things from too much work and too little sleep. But the message remained. And it was appearing on every electronic device across Earth at the same moment. "People of Earth," the message read. "You have been watched. You have been judged. Your species spreads like a disease across space. You take what is not yours. You ask permission from no one." Kim's hands shook as he read the words that continued to appear on his screen. "We are the Galactic Consortium. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 of your years. We maintain peace. We keep order. You threaten both." In the Blue House, President Park Soo-jin was pulled from her sleep by frantic calls from her security team. The same message was appearing on every screen in the presidential palace, in government buildings, on phones, computers, televisions, and even on digital billboards across the city. "Madam President," her chief of staff whispered urgently, "it's not just here. Reports are coming in from every nation on Earth. The message is everywhere, translated into every language." The alien message continued to write itself across the world's screens. "You will stop your expansion into space immediately. You will reduce your population to levels we consider safe. You will submit to our authority and guidance. You will become our subjects, not our equals." Defense Minister Lee Bo-ram burst into the emergency meeting room where the president and her advisors had gathered. Her face was pale with shock and anger. "They're giving us orders like we're children," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Who do these aliens think they are?" Foreign Minister Han Min-seok looked up from his tablet, where he was reading reports from other world leaders. "Every government on Earth is receiving the same message. The Americans, Russians, Chinese, Europeans. Everyone. It's appearing in their native languages automatically. The alien message was reaching its end. You have one full rotation of your planet around your star to comply. If you refuse our generous offer of guidance, we will be forced to take corrective action. We have given you this warning out of mercy. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness." Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the message vanished from every screen on Earth. Dr. Kim sat in stunned silence in his laboratory. His scientific mind tried to process what he had just witnessed. The energy patterns, the quantum signatures, the technology required to simultaneously hack every electronic device on the planet. It was beyond anything humans had ever imagined. Meanwhile, in the consortium's crystalline halls, Admiral Thexivar of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the council. His forearms gestured dismissively as he spoke about Earth. 1 year should be more than enough time for these primitives to understand their situation, he said confidently. When they see they have no choice, they will submit like all the others before them. The council members made sounds of agreement. In their 10,000 years of rule, no species had ever refused their ultimatum. The sight of their vast fleets was usually enough to make entire civilizations surrender without firing a single shot. But they had never dealt with humans before. Back on Earth, the emergency meetings continued through the night. World leaders argued about how to respond. Some wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to prepare for war. A few suggested immediate surrender to avoid destruction. Dr. Kim worked feverishly to analyze the alien technology they had briefly witnessed. In hidden military facilities, generals and scientists began emergency meetings about Earth's defenses. President Park stood at her office window, looking out at the lights of Seoul. Somewhere up there, beyond the stars, alien beings had just threatened her entire species. They had demanded submission and obedience from humanity. She thought about her children, about all the children of Earth, and what kind of future they would have under alien rule. The choice seemed impossible: submit and live as slaves, or resist and face annihilation. But as she watched the sun rise over her city, Park Soo-jin began to think there might be a third option. These aliens had made one critical mistake in their ultimatum. They had given humanity an entire year to prepare. 6 months had passed since the alien ultimatum arrived on every screen across Earth. The world had not responded with words of surrender or pleas for mercy. Instead, humanity had given their answer through action. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin stood in the underground laboratory buried 300 meters beneath the Korean mountains. Around her, the brightest minds from every nation on Earth worked together on projects that would have been impossible just months before. The alien probe that had crashed in the Pacific Ocean 3 years earlier was finally giving up its secrets. "The energy patterns are stable," she announced to her international team of scientists. "We can replicate their power source, but our version will be much larger and less efficient." Her assistant, Dr. Oh Ji-won, looked up from the glowing alien device they had been studying. "Professor, even if our technology is crude compared to theirs, we understand the basic principles now. We can build weapons." Above ground, General Choi Young-ho watched as massive construction projects transformed the Earth. Every major nation had contributed resources and workers to build orbital defense platforms. Giant space elevators carried materials and weapons into orbit faster than anyone had thought possible. "Report," he ordered his aide, Captain Lee Soo-ho. "Sir, the Americans have completed their lunar-based defenses. The Russians finished their asteroid mining operations last week. The Chinese have deployed their orbital weapon platforms around Mars. Every space-capable nation is contributing." The general nodded with grim satisfaction. "And the other projects?" "Colony. Ships are launching daily to establish hidden bases throughout the solar system. We have weapons caches on Europa, Titan, and 17 different asteroids. If Earth falls, the war continues." Far from Earth, on the edge of the solar system, alien scout ships watched these preparations with growing alarm. Admiral Keksamira of the Mordun Collective felt her telepathic abilities stretching across space, trying to read human intentions. What she found disturbed her greatly. Instead of the fear and desperation she expected, human minds burned with cold determination. These creatures were not preparing to surrender or negotiate. They were preparing to fight a war they knew they could not win, simply because they refused to become slaves. "Admiral," her navigator reported, "human activity has increased by 400%. They are building military facilities on every planet and moon in their system." Admiral Keksmira's tentacles writhed with anxiety. "Send a message to the High Council. These humans are not behaving as predicted." On Earth, President Park Soo-jin stood before the United Nations in what had become the most important speech in human history. Representatives from every nation sat in absolute silence as she spoke. "The aliens gave us 1 year to surrender our freedom," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the world through live broadcasts. "We have used these 6 months to prepare our answer." She gestured to the massive screens showing images of humanity's preparations. Orbital weapon platforms, underground bunkers, space-based factories, and fleets of warships under construction. "We will not submit. We will not bow. We will not become slaves to beings who threaten us from the stars. If they want to rule humanity, they will have to earn that right through conquest." The assembly erupted in applause that seemed to shake the building itself. In the secret military command center beneath Seoul, Defense Minister Lee Bo-ram studied tactical reports from around the world. "How many ships do we have operational?" 1,043 warships of various sizes, reported her aide, Major Kang So-young. Not counting the fighter craft and patrol vessels. The orbital platforms number in the hundreds. And compared to their fleet? Major Kang's voice was quiet. Intelligence estimates suggest they have more ships than we have bullets, ma'am. Defense Minister Lee smiled grimly. Then we will have to make every bullet count. The Alien High Council convened an emergency session. As reports of human military buildup reached their crystalline halls, Commander Velthera's form blazed with angry red light as she addressed the gathered species. These primitives dare to defy us, she declared. They build weapons instead of preparing for submission. This is unprecedented. The insect-like Scythron clicked nervously. Perhaps we should increase our fleet size for the enforcement action. Unnecessary, Admiral Thexvar interrupted confidently. Their crude weapons cannot harm our advanced technology. When they see our fleet in person, they will understand the futility of resistance. But deep in the consortium's intelligence networks, other voices whispered warnings. These humans had united their entire species in just 6 months. They had shared technology and resources without regard for their previous conflicts. They had built military infrastructure at a pace that defied galactic norms. Most disturbing of all, they seemed genuinely prepared to fight a war they knew they would lose. Dr. Kim Dae-ho looked up at the night sky from his laboratory roof. Somewhere beyond those stars, an alien fleet was preparing to enforce their ultimatum. But humanity was ready with their own answer. The aliens had given Earth a warning and expected submission. Instead, Earth had spent 6 months preparing to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened humanity's children. The countdown to war had begun, and both sides knew there would be no turning back. The alien fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like a deadly flower blooming in space. 300 ships of impossible beauty and terrible power arranged themselves in perfect formation. Some looked like living creatures with wings and tentacles. Others were geometric shapes that hurt human eyes to look at, and a few seemed to be made of pure energy that shifted and danced. Admiral Thexvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive vessel shaped like a silver spear. His forearms moved gracefully as he prepared to deliver what he expected would be humanity's final moment of defiance before inevitable surrender. Open communications to all human frequencies, he commanded his crew. His voice, when translated into human languages, carried the weight of absolute authority. On Earth, every television, radio, and communication device suddenly activated. The alien admiral's image appeared on screens around the world, a tall, elegant being with skin that seemed to be made of flowing metal and eyes that glowed with inner fire. Humans of Sol 3, Admiral Thexvar began, his voice echoing in living rooms, offices, and military command centers across the planet. You have ignored our generous offer of guidance. Your year of grace has ended. Look upon our fleet in despair. The cameras switched to show the alien armada. Ships that dwarfed Earth's largest cities floated in space like sleeping giants. Energy weapons that could destroy entire planets charged with ominous light. The display was meant to break human morale instantly. Instead, something unexpected happened. Commander Kim Tae-woo sat in the command center of the orbital defense station Terra's Shield. Around him, his crew of volunteers watched the alien broadcast with expressions of grim determination rather than fear. Sir, reported Lieutenant Park Ye-jin from her communication station, all human forces report ready. The trap is set. Kim nodded slowly. These men and women had volunteered knowing they probably would not survive the next few hours, but they had also volunteered knowing their sacrifice might give Earth a chance. Send the message to all stations, Kim ordered. Light them up. The attack began from everywhere at once. Asteroids that had been secretly hollowed out and packed with nuclear explosives suddenly detonated throughout the alien formation. Hidden weapon platforms scattered across the solar system revealed themselves as they opened fire with every weapon humanity had built during their year of preparation. The space around Jupiter erupted in light as massive railguns, mounted on the planet's moons, launched projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The asteroid's belt itself seemed to come alive as weapons platforms disguised as space rocks began firing. Admiral Thexvar stumbled as his flagship shook from multiple impacts. Impossible, he roared. How did they hide so many weapons? Indosh, tactical officer, a being that looked like a floating crystal, reported with panic in its harmonic voice. Sir, they are attacking from 17 different directions. Our sensors did not detect most of these weapon platforms. Captain Zhang Miran piloted her fighter through the chaos, her small ship dancing between alien vessels that were hundreds of times larger. Her fighter squadron had been told they were humanity's first line of defense, but everyone knew they were actually the first to die. Dragon Squadron, break and attack, she commanded over the radio. Show these aliens how humans fight when their children are threatened. Her tiny ship fired its weapons at a bioship that looked like a giant squid floating in space. The alien vessel was the size of a city, but Zhang's missiles found weak points in its organic armor. The creature ship writhed in space as explosions bloomed along its surface. The alien admiral watched in growing horror as his supposedly invincible fleet took serious damage from beings he had expected to surrender immediately. These humans were fighting with tactics that seemed to ignore military logic and common sense. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the humans are using their own ships as weapons. That destroyer just rammed our heavy cruiser. Lieutenant Colonel Song Jae-hun smiled grimly as he guided his damaged warship toward an alien bioship. His engines were failing and his weapons were destroyed, but his ship still had momentum and a nuclear reactor that could be overloaded. This is Song Jae-hun to all human forces, he broadcast on all frequencies. Tell Earth we gave them hell. Tell them we died free. His ship struck the alien vessel, and both disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human forces used every weapon and tactic they could imagine. Ships designed for exploration became improvised missiles. Mining equipment became weapons. Even communication satellites had been weaponized during the year of preparation. The aliens had expected a quick surrender from a primitive species. Instead, they found themselves in a desperate battle against an enemy that fought like cornered animals and seemed to have no concept of acceptable losses. Admiral, his navigator reported with something approaching panic. We have lost 47 ships. Our casualty rate is beyond all projections. Admiral Thexvar stared at the tactical display showing the ongoing battle. His perfect formation was broken, his ships were scattered, and these impossible humans were still fighting. For the first time in his long military career, the alien admiral began to understand that he might have made a terrible mistake. Earth had not ignored their warning through ignorance or inability to understand. Earth had ignored it through choice. 3 years had passed since the first battle at Earth, and the war had spread like wildfire across the galaxy. What the consortium had planned as a simple enforcement action had become their worst nightmare. Human forces now fought on 17 different star systems, and somehow, impossibly, they were winning battles they should have lost. General Nam Ki-seok stood in the command center of the captured alien outpost on Kepler 442b. The facility had been a major consortium supply depot until human forces overran it 6 months ago. Now it served as humanity's forward command base in this sector of space. Report, he ordered his intelligence officer, Major Kang So-young. Sir, our raids on their supply convoys are working. The aliens are having trouble keeping their fleets supplied across such a wide area of space. They never planned for a war that would last this long. The general nodded as he studied the tactical displays. Because they thought we would surrender after losing our first battle. They still do not understand humans. In the medical bay of the same facility, Dr. Shin Hye-jin worked to save wounded soldiers from both sides. The alien prisoners had been shocked to discover that humans would treat enemy wounded with the same care as their own soldiers. A captured Morden telepathic being lay on one of her medical beds, its octopus-like form wrapped in human-made bandages. Through its translator device, it spoke in a voice filled with confusion. Why do you heal us? We came to destroy your world. Dr. Shin looked up from her work. Because that is what humans do. We fight our enemies. But we do not let them suffer. When the fighting stops, the alien's large eyes blinked slowly. We do not understand your species. Across the galaxy, Captain Lim Dong-wook's strike force was returning from another successful raid. Their ships were battered, and his soldiers were exhausted, but they had destroyed another alien weapons factory and captured valuable technology. "Sir," reported his communications officer, Sergeant Park Min-ho, "intelligence says the aliens are calling us the species that refuses to die." Captain Lim allowed himself a tired smile. Good. Fear is a weapon too. His soldiers had learned to fight in ways that terrified their alien enemies. Humans could keep fighting while wounded, in ways that would stop most alien species. They could survive in hostile environments that killed other beings. Most disturbing to the aliens, humans could maintain their fighting spirit even when facing certain death. Meanwhile, in a hidden research facility, the brilliant engineer Kwon Jae-min had achieved what many thought impossible. He had successfully reverse-engineered the alien faster than light drive technology. "We can strike their home systems now," he announced to the assembled War Council via secure communication. "They brought us the tools of our victory when they came to conquer us." The Alien High Council was in emergency session. Commander Velthara's crystalline form pulsed with angry red light as she reviewed casualty reports that seemed impossible to believe. "How can primitives be defeating our advanced fleets?" she demanded. Admiral Thexvar, now bearing scars from 3 years of human warfare, stood before the council with his forearms hanging in defeat. "They fight like no species we have ever encountered. They use tactics that make no military sense but somehow work." The massive insect-like Skithron representative clicked its mandibles nervously. "Their psychological warfare is destroying our soldiers' morale. They broadcast recordings of their dead comrades giving final messages to their families. Our troops hear these and some refuse to fight anymore. They sacrifice their own lives to destroy single enemy ships," added another council member. "They ram our vessels with their own. They overload their reactors to create explosions. They fight as if death means nothing to them." What the aliens could not understand was that death meant everything to humans. Every human soldier who died, fighting bought time for their families, their friends, their entire species to remain free. This knowledge gave them strength that alien warriors, fighting for conquest and glory, could never match. On Earth, President Park Soo-jin reviewed reports from the front lines. The news was both encouraging and terrible. Humanity was winning battles, but the cost was enormous. Every victory came with casualty lists that broke her heart. "Madam President," her chief of staff reported, "the aliens have committed their reserve fleets to the war. Intelligence estimates they have tripled their forces in our sector." President Park looked out the window of her office at the lights of Seoul. Somewhere out there in space, human men and women were fighting and dying to keep those lights burning free. "Send word to all our commanders," she ordered. "Tell them we are proud of them. Tell them Earth remembers every sacrifice." Admiral Thexvar stood alone on his flagship's bridge, staring at the tactical display showing human forces preparing for another assault. His fleet had numerical superiority, better technology, and more experienced crews. But he was beginning to realize that none of that mattered when fighting an enemy that simply would not accept defeat. The humans had turned a simple enforcement action into the costliest war in consortium history, and they showed no signs of stopping. In fact, intelligence reports suggested they were preparing something even more audacious than their previous attacks. The war was escalating beyond all control, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the consortium was beginning to fear they might lose. The simultaneous strikes came without warning across 12 different star systems. Human fleets, using captured and reverse-engineered alien technology, appeared in the heart of the consortium's homeworlds at exactly the same moment. The message was unmistakable. If Earth could reach their most protected systems, nowhere in the galaxy was safe. Admiral Lee Byung-hun commanded the assault on the Vexhari crystal worlds. His fleet of human warships, crude but effective, surrounded the beautiful crystalline cities that floated in space like frozen music. The aliens had never imagined that war could come to their ancient home. "This is Admiral Lee of the Human Defense Force," he broadcast on all frequencies. 3 years ago, you demanded our surrender. This is Earth's final answer. The quantum weapons that humanity had developed from captured alien technology turned the crystal cities into cosmic dust. Each explosion sent rainbow light cascading, across space as 10,000 years of consortium civilization crumbled under human assault. Commander Velthara watched her homeworld's defenses collapse and finally understood the magnitude of her species' mistake. These humans did not fight for conquest or glory. They fought for something far more dangerous, the simple right to exist as free beings. On the Morden telepathic core worlds, Captain Yu Jin-Ah led her marine assault teams through the floating mine cities. The telepathic beings had always been able to read their enemies' thoughts and predict their actions, but human soldiers had learned to compartmentalize their minds, hiding their true intentions behind layers of tactical thinking. "Move fast and stay focused," Captain Yu ordered her troops as they planted explosive charges throughout the telepathic relay stations. "Do not let them into your heads." The Morden defenders found themselves fighting blind for the first time in their species' history. Without their telepathic advantages, their superior technology meant nothing against human soldiers who had learned to fight in conditions that would break most alien minds. Across the galaxy, similar attacks were happening simultaneously. The insect-like Skithron hive worlds burned under human bombardment. The energy-based Luminar found their pure light cities disrupted by human electromagnetic weapons. Every member species of the consortium watched their most secure systems fall to an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. Admiral Thexavar stood on his flagship's bridge, receiving damage reports from across consortium space. Half of their home systems were under attack. Their fleets were scattered and demoralized, and the humans showed no signs of stopping their advance. "Admiral," his communications officer reported with trembling harmonics, "the High Council is requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations." For a moment, the alien admiral said nothing. He had commanded fleets for 3 centuries and had never faced defeat. Now, a species that had barely learned to travel between planets was dictating terms to the greatest military force in the galaxy. "Open a channel to Earth," he ordered quietly. President Park Soo-jin sat in the Blue House Situation Room, surrounded by her military advisors and government officials. The screens around them showed the ongoing attacks on alien homeworlds, humanity's final desperate gamble to end the war before the consortium could marshal their full strength. "Madam President," her communications officer announced, "we are receiving a transmission from the alien fleet commander. He is requesting ceasefire negotiations." The room fell silent. After 3 years of war, countless battles, and millions of casualties on both sides, the aliens were finally ready to talk. "Put him through," President Park ordered. Admiral Thexvar's image appeared on the main screen. The proud alien warrior looked older than when the war began, his 4 arms bearing scars from human weapons. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former arrogance. "President Park of Earth," he began formally, "the consortium requests immediate cessation of hostilities and peace negotiations." President Park studied the alien admiral's face for a long moment before responding. "3 years ago, you gave us a warning. We tried to give you one too, that we would defend ourselves at any cost. You chose to ignore it." The alien's eyes closed briefly. "We underestimated your species' capacity for warfare." "No," President Park corrected him. "You underestimated our capacity for freedom." The Treaty of Sol was signed 3 weeks later, aboard a neutral space station at the edge of human territory. The consortium, their fleets crippled and their homeworlds vulnerable, agreed to recognize humanity as equals rather than subjects. More importantly, they agreed to leave Earth and all human colonies completely independent. Fleet Admiral Kim Soo-ho, now bearing the scars of humanity's longest war, stood with the alien delegates as they signed the historic agreement. Representatives from 12 different species put their marks on the document that would reshape galactic politics forever. "Welcome to the galactic community," Admiral Kim said simply as the ceremony concluded. "Try not to threaten us again." Years passed. In alien schools across the galaxy, young beings learned about the Earth Wars in their history classes. They studied the conflict that taught the galaxy's greatest powers that technology and numbers meant nothing against an enemy that refused to accept slavery. The lesson was simple. The smallest predator can bring down the largest prey when survival is at stake. Earth had been given a warning and chose to ignore it. The galaxy learned what happens when humanity gives a warning in return. The species that had once demanded submission now spoke of humans with something approaching reverence. They had earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through an unbreakable refusal to bow. Earth's children would grow up free.